Hi, welcome back to CS170 fall section, and we're in week 3, trying to get through chapter 4 here, which is covering HTML. Uh, you'll also notice here that we have multiple weeks. So next week, we're also going to cover chapter 4. So it's really all HTML, right? So what you get this week on your basic, on your recitation is your basic HTML, and then we're going to go into more advanced HTML. Okay, so HTML is a pretty big topic for your exam 1. As you can see, going into next week, we're actually kind of hitting the end of like what you're going to cover for the first semester. I mean, not first semester, first exam. So it's all this white area here. Okay, so what I'm covering here for chapter 4 is the beginning part of HTML, but there's only so much I'm going to cover here as a general lecture, asynchronous, right? You really need to make sure you talk to your TAs, understand what they're covering, and you'll see both on my lecture and the book, and then the recitation to follow up on that, and the assignment. They all line up in terms of reinforcing essentially how does HTML work, okay? So do make a note of that. Obviously, we're spending a lot of time on it. It's going to be a significant portion of your exam, okay? So if there's anything that comes through here that you don't understand the concept-wise, make sure you let us know, okay? So, we'll show you like the different things about how the HTML tags work and stuff like that. But keep in mind, these are just basically like components, almost like pieces of like the recipe or the puzzle. And then you're going to basically put these together in different ways on your own, right? That's part of like, the creativity that you can have. So when you apply these, and if you're having some questions about how these things work together, then you should let us know, right? So one example, which, is very frequent that you might have, is that we're doing stuff with tables, and I'll point to tables later when we get to it. But the different elements that you would use to like make things bold or use particular fonts or the size of the fonts, you can apply that within the table, right? So, you'll be putting pieces of these together, right? You'll be putting like different types of lists together and stuff like that. So if you don't really understand how these things kind of work and how they kind of come together, you need to kind of raise your hand and let us know because these are important things. Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out from the schedule standpoint. So let's get to the lecture. Okay. Let me get to the top here. A lot of slides here. And if you look here, decent number of terms to understand, right? I'm not going to read through each of these, but you can take a look at these, and I'm going to be hitting on most of these as I run through this lecture. But if there's terms in here that you don't know, and then I'm not hitting it or the TA is not hitting it, send me an email, post it, Piazza, whatever, and we'll follow up on that. Okay. All right. So HTML, what's it stand for? Hypertext Markup Language. Okay. And this is where you look at your browser as your screen, right? Your web browser, right? And you have all kinds of data coming in, right? And you want to kind of tell the browser, how do I display this data, right? How do I put it together so that you can read it, you can interact with it, or whatever. Okay. So this kind of sums it up right here, right? And then the other part, which I mentioned to you in the last lecture, where there's bits of information within here that tells the web crawlers what's this page all about, okay? So if you just put it out there and you don't think anything of it, you just kind of write some stuff and just say, okay, bold and this or that, keep it very simple. That's not good for the web crawlers. The web crawlers don't really they can figure a lot of things out. They program with some rules. Maybe there's some AI involved to try to figure out what the page is about. But you can make your life a whole lot easier in terms of like putting in the right bits of information, right? There's a whole, kind of like function around this called search engine optimization, where people want their pages to come out high in terms of like the search results, right? If I do a search on any particular thing, I will have thousands and thousands of pages that will come back, right? So how do you make your thing pop up? You have to do certain things, and to help the crawler to understand what your page is about. I mean, there's other things too to help your page rankings, which I mentioned in the last lecture also, right? But HTML is part of that equation on how you can make your page rank higher, essentially. All right. Cascading style sheets, that's basically a sort of a way to kind of scale up in terms of like making things, whatever format that you want, right? So you can do things inline, right? So you can put your tags around certain things as you go. But if you're doing like, a very complex website, big pages or whatever, that becomes very cumbersome and tiresome after a while. And, the fact is there's actually, HTML5 editors, and there's a number of other things to kind of help make your life easier. So it's very rare that you're actually going to write a web page from scratch. But let's say you were, part of things that kind of make your life less cumbersome is these cascading style sheets. And what that does is like either within the page or actually over a set of pages, you can refer to these types of formatting, saying, okay, I want all of my tables to look like a certain way, right? And then you can refer to this style sheet, and basically, if later on you decide, actually, I want to change the color on this, you only change it in the one place, and it will fix everything, right? That's referring to the style sheet. Okay, we'll go into it more a little bit later on. Okay, and yeah, you may have noticed this, right? If you do a lot of this stuff that's on the cloud, like your emails and whatever like documents that you have online, there's a lot of stuff now that basically the formatting is really handled by HTML. Okay, so you can go in there, you can say, oh, let me see the HTML behind this, right? A lot of times they'll have like an editor that's in front that kind of does all the basic stuff, but maybe you want to do something a little bit more fancy and whatnot. You'll kind of break it out into the HTML, and you'll do your own custom type of stuff. And that's certainly within your power once you understand how the HTML works. Okay. Yeah, basically just talking about it's pretty much all over the place, right? Whether you're looking at the your desktop, your mobile, right? Different types of browsers and whatnot. Plays into the page ranking. I talked about mobile before. You have things like video, geolocation, and like principles with UX, user experience type of stuff. And, I forgot what I mentioned about cookies before, but that's basically how it maintains like that feeling that you're engaging with the server. So it stores bits of information, kind of evolve into other things that were not so good for the user. So that's why there's always these warnings about using cookies and stuff like that. So I put down HTML5 editor, and I'll show you why a little bit later as we go into editing some HTML. Okay. So there's different bits, information here. I'm not going to go into on this page. I'm going to hit it on some of the other pages here, but talks about the formatting, talks about how you structure the HTML, things like white space, what happens with white space, and we'll cover that because I have those in the other pages coming up. Okay, so describing a web page, right? Don't worry about reading all of this text here, right? But basically, all of the different things, the informations that, is coming through, you're telling the window, the browser, how to display it, right? Maybe you want certain colors as your background and whatnot. So there's a separation between the formatting and the data or the content of it, right? And so that allows for a lot of different things in terms of flexibility, right? When you have like the data kind of decoupled from the formatting, you can take a common piece of data and reuse it many different times, and you can kind of present it in different ways depending on what you're trying to do. So as opposed to kind of saying, okay, here's a page and this is how I want it formatted, and everything's all kind of built in together, right? It's kind of decoupled, and it's basically taking the HTML and separating the markup and separating from the data, okay? And so, it gives you a lot of flexibility when you do stuff like that. And we can go into that a little bit later. It's mentioned in the book also, okay? But over here on the right talks a little bit about that, okay? So the fact that it's not storing like these fixed objects or pages, is one of the advantages, okay? All right, so once you talk about HTML, you start getting into these things, talking about formatting, and you're doing it with these like pairs of things called tags, right? So one example of that would be the title, okay? So you'll notice what happens when you have a tag, right? So you have this part, in this case, we're talking about title, and then you have to close it off with the other end of the pair, but the only difference is this like / right here, okay? And then what's in between here, in the case of title, that's essentially what pops up in the top tab over here. So you see like these tabs here at the top, and you'll see like there's different text up there. That's what goes in there, okay? Yeah, so this part is true. This basically fills out that top part on your browser, the tab part. But it also helps with talking about what this page is about. Okay, so usually you're going to put something in here. Okay, very rare that you won't put something in there, right? I don't know why you would want to have a browser with a blank tab up here, but I guess theoretically you could have something like that. And this is a good point here, right? So the tag pair surrounds the text to be formatted, right? Or acted upon, right? So in this case, this title part is what's going to be acted on by these tags of title, okay? And then you would call this the element, right? So whatever is inside the tag is the element, okay? So that's what's getting acted on. Okay, so this is kind of like what you would call a skeleton, basic parts for any page. So a lot of times, like maybe for your exam, let's say, we'll give you the skeleton, right? We'll give you a file and it will have this, right? This top part tells you it's HTML. You'll have your HTML tag here saying this is all HTML. There'll be a top section that'll be like the header, kind of like a header, you can call it. So it's called head, and then the body, right? And this has like, the actual stuff that you're going to display within the page itself, okay? And we'll go into each of these, but these are kind of like key elements, or like I said, like a skeleton or an outline here, okay? And we'll go into each of these in a second. Okay, so here's the head section. All right, so I already told you what title was about. Okay, and you have these character set UTF-8, just kind of a not really much for you to think about there, right? So you just kind of put that in there. It just tells you the character set that's being used for that page. Okay, this is the title, like what I mentioned before. And then there'll be some other stuff that we'll talk about that, basically helps the either the crawler or you get into things like the CSS style sheets. I remember I mentioned the CSS style sheets, the cascading style sheets, or it gets into like, some of the scripts and stuff like that, essentially JavaScript that you're going to put in here. Okay. So the body, that's the main part here, right? This is where whatever you put in there, you can see down here, this is what is the main content. That's where it goes, okay? Don't worry, I'm kind of going through this, but I'm gonna show you an example soon, okay? And so here's like some different types of tags that most commonly you're gonna use, okay? So I think this is kind of self-explanatory, but basically you can kind of create like, it's just a way of organizing or partitioning your document, okay? So you have paragraphs, you have these heading styles. Essentially, it's like a quick way of kind of just saying, okay, I want this to be very big, like big size and font and bold, let's say, bold intensity, maybe you can call it, right? And then as you kind of work your way through it, it could be less big and less bold, right? So it's kind of just like a quick way, instead of you explicitly setting up your tags to do bold, right? You can see the B down here, right? To do bold, and you can do like the font size and the font and whatnot, right? So this H1 to H6 is basically a quick way to kind of just say, okay, I want an H1, right? This is like the biggest reasonable size and bolding that I want. So this is important. That's why it's called H1, let's say, okay? And maybe I'll put that into the sample when I go into that in a second. Italics, right? Well, that's self-explanatory. Superscript, you can see this, right? Hello world, you can see the world up here. Underline, right? That's kind of self-explanatory. And then, yeah, this is another point here about orders, right? So, when you do this, you're basically going to put the B on the outside, right? Let's say for the sake of argument, you say, oh, I have BIU on the left-hand side. I can just put BIU on this side. It kind of doesn't work that way. Things are going to get screwed up if you do that, right? So you kind of almost match them off like pair by pair and make sure relative to the other tag, you keep that lined up, right? Otherwise, things are going to get screwed up, right? So what I mean by that, you can see this B is to the outside for bold. And then the next level in is the I for italics. And then same thing on this side, is the next one going in. It's I for italics. And then the same thing for U for underline. You see that's like essentially the innermost one. Then you want on this side, the matching off the underline to be the innermost one also, okay? So although most things are pairs in HTML, you have a couple of exceptions, and these are exceptions right here, right? So if you want to produce a horizontal line across for your document, HTML, I call them document, HTML doc, then you would use this HR, standing for horizontal line. This is essentially a line break, right? So you kind of break it and then it starts off the text at the next line. This one's kind of common. I think I probably use this a lot, the line breaks. And then like what I was saying before, meta is to help provide search engine information, okay? And this is what I was talking about before, H1 to H6, right? You can see what I mean, right? When I say H1, it kind of makes it like level one, the strong, quote unquote, strong, right? It's big, it's bold, right? You can see it gets smaller and smaller until you get down to H6. So like I said, it's just a quick way to quickly do this instead of kind of messing around with like fonts, font sizing, and bold and whatnot, right? You just have one quick thing, you say H1, boom, that's it, okay? Of course, you can do more with this from like the cascading style sheet perspective, and you can customize it to whatever you want. But this is what kind of what you get out of the box, right? And you get that, okay? Uh, so the point here about the white space is that, yeah, it's good when you're writing up the HTML yourself to put space in there, so it's more readable from a human perspective. But a computer doesn't care about that, right? So a computer is just gonna, crank through all that and just display it. So this is an important point. HTML ignores white space. So you're kind of, playing around with your editor, kind of making everything look nice. And then you wonder what happened when you display it in the browser and everything's all smushed together, right? So you have to kind of use explicit things to create white space. For example, when I was talking about the BR here to make the new line there, right? So don't think that you can say, oh, I can do a carriage return and then magically it will show up on the browser. It's not going to do that. It's going to smush everything together. So you have to put a BR in there to make that pop through and do a carriage return. Okay. Right. So same thing, right? You can put in as much white space as you want, but that's what's going to happen when you actually render it on the browser. Okay. And so this is kind of like flexible, right? You've probably seen it when you play around with the browser on your desktop, right? As you kind of resize it, the text will kind of float around and move around based on that. Okay. And so that's what this is, right? The only exception to this, like I said, is when you force the carriage return or force the break with the BR, let's say. Okay. Or there's any number of other tags that you can kind of push to make things float to the left or float to the right or go to the bottom or whatever. But if you don't do any of those type of things, when you resize the browser, like everything kind of moves around based on the browser. Okay. So this is an example of that, right? So here's what the HTML looks like. You're doing stuff in your HTML and you say, oh, I like the look of having this. So I put these blank space here, right? That's blank space. That's what it's supposed to look like there, I guess. But then when you look at this on the browser, here's the browser, right? You can see a little tab up here. You can see what happened here. Everything got compressed together. There is no carriage return here, right? You can see slow runner got a 10-meter head start. See on your browser, I mean, not your browser, your editor, you showed this, whereas the browser pushed it all together. So that's what's going to happen. Okay. So creating a web page, you get the editor and the browser, right? I know it's kind of a pain, right? So you got to do this editor type of thing, make your changes there, save it, and then go point to it from a browser and then refresh the browser. Okay. And I'm going to show you that in a second. But yeah, so you have two windows. You have the editor. In this case, the editor is on the left-hand side and the browser is on the right-hand side. Okay. And this is a good point for me to break. So let me break here and let me show you. Here's my quick little sample HTML. Okay. So you remember some of the stuff from the skeleton I talked about, right? Here's HTML. Here's the head. Put a little title top. I don't know. Maybe I'll put title sample here for something or something, right? So let me put title sample. Yeah, maybe I don't need to say USA so many times. New Jersey. We're going to cover escape characters later. So I put in here, you can look at it in my sample later when I post it up to Canvas, but I'm not going to cover this until next week, I think. So don't worry about this for the escape characters, but notice the H1, right? See the H1s here? H1, put P's in here for new paragraph. Boom, P, P, P. Did I put any BRs in here? Yeah, look, I got a BR in here. Let's bring this in, make this a little bit neater. Okay, close this up here a little bit. All right, so over here, this is just a way of me referring to a picture, right? So this is just the location of that picture here. And then I have some ways to kind of make it. In this case, I'm making a float to the right, a little bit of description. I set the width on this, okay? I set up a table here, a couple other little things in here. Don't have to worry too much about it for now. You can keep it for reference for the future. We'll be covering it soon enough. Let's go to the browser and let's see what does that look like. Let me save this. So this is what I mean. You kind of have to save this. And let me squeeze this together here. And then where's my browser at? Here's my browser. Let me refresh this like so. Bring it together a little bit. And yeah, so this is it, right? I kind of squished it, the tab you can't see, but you can see title sample here, right? So title sample, and then you can see basically the outcome of me doing all this formatting, right? So I had to go into this little editor here. I tend to use Notepad++. It's sort of useful here, right? You can see like there's little colors and stuff like that here. I kind of find it actually a little bit more useful when I'm doing like the JavaScript stuff, which you'll be doing later on. Kind of helps me identify things that, I had a typo somewhere or I missed a pair or something. The colors get all screwed up. So you can see like this, you can see what happened, right? This is like the H1, and then it showed me like there's a other offsetting pair, H1 here, right? And then you can see like I can get these other colors here to highlight the same thing. So yeah, it's a little bit useful to helping me like, troubleshoot and whatnot, right? You can see these kind of things going on here. It's very common for people to have typos and mess up on these pairs and stuff like that. So I kind of found Notepad++ was good enough for me. I know like some of the TAs, they like to use some other editors because they're a little bit more robust. They have, some more features and stuff like that, like Visual Studio or whatever, right? But this comes with on Windows machines, where you can get them on Windows machine fairly easily. Notepad++. I believe for MacBook, you're probably using Atom, ATOM, whichever one you use. It's up to you. It's fine, right? Even if you want to just use a plain text editor, you can do that. But plain text editor doesn't help you with little hints. But that's up to you. Okay. All right. So here's the browser, right? Sort of a pain that you have to kind of do stuff here in the editor, save it. So I saved it into my local desktop here, right? Then I double clicked it and it popped up. My default browser is Chrome. So it pops up on here. And then every time I make changes here, I save it and then refresh it to here. Okay. And that's really how you're basically showing what your work looks like when you put it on here, right? When you do this for your assignment, you're going to basically send your HTML file up onto Canvas. You're going to upload it to Canvas, and then your TA is going to download it onto their machine, and then open up the HTML and see what it looks like, okay? So the other thing I like to do is I use this thing called html5editor.net. Okay, you can see it up here on the browser. What I like about this is I kind of have the editor and then I have what it gets rendered on the browser right next to each other. Okay, it's not perfect, right? This is not like, like a super production ready type of thing, but it kind of works most of the time on stuff, right? So as you type stuff in here, it will pop up on the right-hand side. You can see how it does the whole pairing off thing again, like similar to what I did with Notepad++. So I can type, and you can see on the right-hand side, it pops in here, right? If you didn't see what I'm doing, right, you can see, I can say name ABC, and it pops up here, okay? So I kind of I get like instant gratification. I kind of do my thing on the left-hand side and it shows up on the right. Okay, now the only tricky thing here is number one, like I said, this is not 100% production quality. There are some like little quirky bugs in here. But number two, you can't just copy and paste this into an HTML file, right? You can see at the top here, all you're starting off with here is the H2. So basically what this is showing is all the stuff that might be in your body, okay? Versus like the full HTML file, which is like here on the left-hand side. is what you would be showing, okay? What I did here, you can see I kind of did it a little bit here. Oops, where am I? Okay. I kind of pasted it here, and theoretically I can do stuff on the right-hand side, but you're not going to get good results. See what happened here? I did this, and it tried to kind of carry the stuff over here back to the left-hand side, and it kind of squished things together and whatnot. So it's not 100% like the best thing here. It kind of works, but it might be a little bit confusing for people. So for people that are doing this, I would suggest just look at this as the body HTML, do some of your stuff. And if you're happy with what you see here, then you just take this, copy it, and paste it into the body part here. You can see the body here, right? And paste it into here. You might think that's more trouble than me just doing the HTML editor on the left and the browser on the right. It's your choice, okay? So I just put that out there. But here is some real HTML code, okay? I'm gonna upload this as part of my resources. So you'll see that as sample. You can download on your computer, play around with it and whatnot, okay? And there's like these validation tools, right? So you can actually take your HTML and paste it into these, right? And it'll kind of come back and say, oh yeah, this is like a syntax error or something like that. So that could be useful too, right? This will help double check your work for you. All right, so there's more on the tags that I just walked through before. So take a look at these, make sure you understand what they're all about. And there's a few more tags talking about lists and stuff like that. And I'll talk about lists a little bit later on. So don't stress if you don't know what the lists are right now. All right, HTML code, like so. Here's some more example, right? I did a little bit of this already in my sample right here. So, but you can see this. I didn't type all of this exactly, but kind of close. Talking about attributes, right? So this is the meta I was talking about. Absolute reference. I think all you have to think about, so there's this section here, absolute and relative reference here, okay? So it actually is kind of important. You should know about this, right? So absolute reference is basically your full path, right? So the whole path of like whatever place you're going to, right? So in this case, let's say that, okay? And then if they're referring to some other stuff, let's say within their setup, they had like one section to cover one page and then another, folder to cover another page or whatever, then they would kind of show the full path, okay? Because you're not on that machine, right? When you do stuff locally on your machine, then you can do things called relative path, right? But for you accessing like another machine or something like that, you can only access what they give to you, and you have to be explicit. You have to kind of show the whole path there because you're not really sitting on that machine, right? So main thing you have to know for absolute reference is this idea, right? The reference is the entire URL, okay? And like I said before, so this is where if you're writing your own website, you have your own pages. I shouldn't say writing your own website. You're setting up pages on your website. Then you can do relative path, right? And then you can, say, here's the home directory of where my home page is at. And then I have a folder, let's say for pictures. And I can do like, a reference relative to my homepage to where those pictures are at. And when you do this for your assignment, that's what you're going to have to do, right? Because remember, your TA is going to take your HTML and your pictures and whatever else you put in there, and download it onto their machine, and then run your HTML essentially, right? So they have no idea what your file system on your computer looks like, right? So you have to package everything up so it'll work on theirs. Now, the cheap way to do this is just kind of put everything all in the same folder, right? Your index.html and all your pictures and everything, you put them all there. and then you give it to your TA, and then they'll just kind of run it from whatever folder that they do it. But the idea with this class is like, normally that's not how you would do it, right? So if I send it to someone else, I'll probably have like different folders, like one folder maybe for pictures, like I said. So then you would be saying, oh, okay, here's my index. This is the folder where my index.html file is at. And then I have to go down one level to a folder called picture, right? And within that is whatever picture I'm going to be displaying, right? And so that's the way relative path, right? If I want to do full path within my machine, probably, let's say I have a Windows machine, I'll probably say something like C:/, desktop, oh, not desktop, maybe desktop, C:/desktop / pick / whatever ABC picture or something like that. That's the full path. But like I said, when your TA downloads that HTML, who says they have a C drive? Maybe they have a D drive, right? There's no way that you can give them a full path and have them run your HTML locally on their machine. So that's why you would use relative path, okay? Hopefully I kind of covered absolute and relative path to you. And when we get into like the examples, maybe you can see a little bit better, okay? So here's your file structure. So like I was saying here, generally you're going to have like your index HTML, that's your main page, and then you have your folders here, right? So how do I go from my web page here and say, oh, I want to get, one of these down here, right? And maybe I actually have to like the JPEGs or whatever over here, right? And that's where you use the relative path, right? You're not going to use like this C:/document settings and blah, blah, all the way down. You would start from the index HTML and go into your folders, your photos folder, I should say. They like to use a tree as an analogy here. And I think this kind of lays it out pretty well here, okay? So from your index HTML to a gift .html, you would just refer to it right there, right? Because it's in the same folder, right? So you see your index HTML here, and then you have your agif HTML here. It's all the same folder, so you don't have to do anything, right? So this is your relative path, right? It's in the same folder, right? Now, when you go to fun HTML, you can see where fun HTML is at. It's right here where this LOL cat is, that folder, LOL cat folder. So what you have to do is you have to say, okay, relative to where my index HTML is, I have this LOL cat folder, and within that folder is the fun HTML, right? So you have to do LOL cat /fun.html to refer to that file, okay? And you can see tabby.html is all the way down here in this friend folder. So you have to go down 2 levels. You have to go down LOL cat, friend, and then you get the tabby.html. So this is a relative path going down from where your starting point is here, right? Index HTML in the my cat folder. Now, what happens when you want to go up? When you want to go up, then you have to do .. right? So let's say I'm at the tabby.html, which is the bottom down here, and I want to go up to the fun HTML, which is 1 level up here, okay? And so I would do .. /fun.html. That means going up 1 level. Now, if I want to go to agif HTML, I want to go up 2 levels, so then I put 2 of these here, .. / to agif HTML over here, okay? And then you want to go all the way up and down, right? This is an up and down thing, right? You want to go to this old cat HTML. You have to go up 3 levels, right? Starting from friend, you go 1, 2, and 3, right? And then you're going to go back down into Marcat old HTML, okay? So that's what the relative path is all about. Okay, so hopefully you can follow this, make a note of this. walk through some examples on your own. It's important that you understand that you're gonna have to do this for your homework assignment. You're gonna have to do this on your exam, okay? So relative path, like I said, you're gonna be doing the absolute path when it's not your web page, right? You're referring to someone else, right? Like when I refer to this picture, I don't own this picture. This is like senaterutgers.edu, blah, blah, right? So that's why I had to show the full path, this whole thing here, right? If I was doing this and I had the web page and I was like part of senaterutgers.edu, then maybe I only have to go down to like uploads 2019 7 and blah, blah, right? I don't have to put in this full path. But because I'm coming in from the outside, I have to put in this full path like that to get to that picture. Okay, so I hope that's all clear there. Let me see here. Where am I? Okay. So we have links, right? There's a big part with web pages, right? So href, hyperlink reference, okay? So, you see it all the time, right? This little blue thing, right? I click on it and I go to another web page, okay? So that's what this is all about here, okay? So this Bertrand is lined up with here, normal text, nothing special about that. And then you got this whole block here, right? All within this A here, right? And then you have the offsetting tag here, right? /A over here, right? And then this text here is basically like this blue color, Russell, right here, right? So that's the link, right? I click on that and that's what's going to bring me to this full path right here, this russell.html, okay? So this is the format. So you follow that, right? So you have the A, within the A, you have the href equals to, in this case, the full website path. And then you close it off with the /A. And then whatever text that you want to make it so that people click on it, you just put it here where it says Russell, okay? So you can practice with that a little bit. Okay, and this just talks a bit about it again, right? Talking about the text and the reference here, right? So here's the reference and here's the text here, okay? Like that, here's the text and here's the reference, okay? All right, and this part just highlights all of the stuff in yellow that we covered. And then as I go into next week, I'll be covering more of the HTML. We'll cover some of these other parts here, okay? And like doing styles and stuff like that, okay? I know covered a lot of material, so hopefully take a look at this, take a look at my sample when I put it up there, and let me know if there's any questions. Your TAs will be covering more of the HTML stuff. I'll be covering more of HTML, and obviously it's in the book. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of resources in W3 schools. Take a look at those. Look at your modules. Where am I here? Look at your modules here. I'll close this. Modules. Right, so you got HTML modules, references, okay, so you see all of this stuff here, right? So take a look at that stuff and hopefully you can get your head around like this HTML stuff, okay? All right, thank you. And oh, well, I forgot, we have extra credit. So, why don't you do something like this, right? Go into like I'll give you my sample HTML, create your own version, right? You can put your name .html, create a HTML file with your name, and just do something similar. You can type in whatever you want, right? Don't go too crazy because you're essentially going to be doing HTML for your assignment, which will be a more robust version. So for extra credit, I would say just send me like a simple HTML. You can actually just take this and kind of work with it and fill in what you want. You can play around with different tags like bold and italics, and whatnot, and see if you can, add some flair, and we'll go from there. Okay, you can send me the HTML as an attachment to your email. Oh, and do try to send your email to like my Rutgers.edu account. Try not to use Canvas mail. Actually, even for the TAs, most of us don't check the Canvas mail, so we might miss it, or it might take longer to get the mail there. So if you send us mail, send it to the Rutgers EDU email. Okay. All right. Thank you and have a good night.